Well, good evening. This is WeatherBrains episode 1016. And this is for Monday, the 7th of July. And obviously, there's a lot to discuss tonight concerning a horrific tragedy, and we're going to bring everybody on. And tonight is just going to be us. We thought tonight we just needed some time to talk and decompress. And what we'd like to do tonight is to just give you an honest, nonpartisan, non political deconstruction of what we know and what we don't know about what happened in Texas last week, the Texas Hill Country. And obviously, this particular group, our own group, is uniquely qualified to discuss the situation. And again, we're going to do this in an orderly, appropriate fashion tonight. So just strap in. And if you're new here, we're glad you're here. We typically are live every Monday night at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. This is nothing new. We do this every week. We've been doing it for 19 years. So let's get the recorders going here. It's just going to be us tonight. So we're going to record track number 1, track number 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
This is WeatherBrains episode number 1016 for Monday, the 7th of July. And we come to you tonight with heavy hearts. We have had another horrific weather tragedy, and we're just going to talk about it tonight. I think what I would like to do is just to listen. We've got some really smart people that are on this show every week. They're a lot smarter than me. And what I'd like to do is learn tonight. And obviously, we've got a structure to this. And Bill Murray, let me bring you in and kind of let you open up the discussion here. And again, we're going to focus the show on the Texas Hill Country flash flood event that killed at least 100 people last week. What happened in terms of meteorology, in terms of the behavioral science, and there's a lot of things we don't know. But Bill Murray, I'm just going to open it up and let you start, and that you've got a structure for the show tonight.
Yeah, James. We all woke up Friday morning to the news out of the Texas Hill Country about this catastrophic flash flood. After 10 to 15 inches of rain fell overnight, we know tonight that at least 100 people have passed away, including dozens of children at summer camps along the Guadalupe River. The event, even though it was well warned, it was very deadly. It's the deadliest flash flood in the United States, at least since the 1970s. No flash flood. And John Gordon, you might can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any flash flood has killed more than 100 people since at least 1980. And this is a chance for us first to reflect, to remember those that were lost. We lost people in the Birmingham area. And being someone who's lost a child, I know how hard that is. And, you pack them up to go to a summer camp, and it's the last thing you would ever expect to have happen. And so with each passing statistic, it just gets harder and harder. So tonight, it's not about accountability or anything at this point, even though I think we can, talk about some of the things that went right and learn from that, and, see what we can do. But this is the kind of flash flood that we all fear, extreme rainfall and rugged terrain, a nocturnal event overnight, with lives being lost in just minutes. So tonight we want to remember those that were lost and those heroes that saved lives, and some of them lost their own lives in that process. So my first experience with hill country flooding was in 1978. The remnants of Tropical Storm Amelia. Weather was slow here during that time. I remember I was going to get my driver's license that day. Our beloved J.B. Elliott, the late J.B. Elliott was a member of this panel, was broadcasting on NOAA Weather Radio here in Birmingham. And on those slow days, he would give weather from other parts of the country. And that morning, he was giving bulletins from the hill country of Texas. And they sounded a lot like the bulletins from late Thursday night and early Friday morning about the very same river. He did several stories that morning giving play by play about ongoing flash flooding in the hill country. At one point, he said there was a warning that the Guadalupe was rising 10 feet per hour and had covered the US 281 bridge. People were being evacuated away from the river. I got to go there a year later, and I remember being haunted, sitting on a beautiful hillside, having a barbecue as a student on a student trip, being captivated by the natural beauty, but being unsettled by what had happened less than a year before. And on that final Friday of my trip, I had the opportunity to visit the National Weather Service in San Antonio. And of course, they were having heavy rain and severe thunderstorms. Ed DiLoretto, Troy, I bet you remember him, was the MIC of the office, and he was giving me the tour. But Troy, talk about what makes the hill country so beautiful and so susceptible to flooding.
And I think that, I don't know how I've been thinking all day about how I began tonight, but I think that's a good place to start. It's a beautiful area, Bill. You know that. You've been here, and some of my fellow WeatherBrainers have as well. And on any given day to get out here and drive through the hill country, Kerrville, Fredericksburg, it's just a beautiful place. And I think that's why, and I don't know that's why there's so many people come to this area, retirees, people like that. Bill, you know that they come out here. They go to places like Fredericksburg to Kerrville, and so any given day you sit out there and there's a low water crossing. It crosses the roadway, um, and um, and you just sit out there and it has a very calming effect. Um, but for too many years around here, we continue to see these events. And there's sort of a reason for it in a sense. And it doesn't mean that with John Gordon being up in Kentucky and Rick up in Norman and other places where we have our weather service people that are watching tonight. But the Texas Hill Country is a unique place. Those beautiful hills and the little streams that flow beside them very calmly in low water crossings. First of all, there's a reason, sorry for the humor here, but there's a reason we call it the hill country. They're hills. And so if you get a substantial amount of rain over a short period of time, as we've seen the last 5 days, it's going to start running downhill, number one. Number two is the thing you don't see so easily. And I will tell a joke on myself. Years ago, I went out to somewhere in the hill country to put a rain gauge in, and I pulled in to a friend of mine's ranch, and I got out with a hole digger. And he sat on the front porch of the house and he looked over and he said, "What in the hell are you going to do with that?" I said, "It's my intention to bury a post to put a rain gauge on." And he looked at me, he smiled. He says, "You will need dynamite to do that." Folks, the Texas Hill Country, or at least a good part of it, look at the geology of that area, is subsoil limestone layers. And in some cases, it's only inches from the surface. And if you think for a second that the little bit of soil, which in some cases is very minimal, on top of that limestone, is going to absorb any rainfall, and especially at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 inches of rain an hour, it's just not happening. So you got the hills, now you got the subsoil limestone layers, and then the big thing that people like Rick and my friend Paul Ura, who's now retired from Austin San Antonio office, have always talked about, and that is the huge amount of urbanization that we're seeing in the I-35 corridor. We're seeing it in other places around the country. But folks, there's no way you can sit here and tell me that if we put a parking lot in for a shopping center, that asphalt or that concrete is going to allow moisture to soak into it. It doesn't. So it immediately becomes runoff. So the urbanization is a big issue. It's those three things. And the urbanization is a big issue between Austin and San Antonio. I tell people, even in Kerrville, there's the area's growing. More and more concrete, more and more impervious cover, and you have that runoff, and it puts it right into the Guadalupe River. So that's we know that. That's why this happens so much around here. But I will tell you that I'm a native Texan. You all know that. I grew up part of my life in Mississippi. But in Texas, we just don't get it. We continue to have these type events occurring. We go back to when you talked, Bill, about the storm in the late 70s. I still remember John Patton, who was our hydrologist in 1987, when that church school bus came down the Guadalupe and it swept all those campers to their deaths, or most of them. Still remember that. And the video that was in that, what's it called? Awesome Power, I believe is the name, or Awesome Force. That's the name of the NOAA release that came out following that, in an attempt to show people what it was like to be carried away by moving water. But what frustrates me, and I look at today and I think is sad, is we just continue to have it happen. And I've been questioned by the media in the last couple of days. And we've got to come up with an answer on this. We've got to ask some tough questions. I'll tell you right now, I'm working with 2 rescue groups, and it's their job. I'm working with them on a daily basis. It's their job to recover bodies. They're seeing things that none of us, like James has pointed out before in tornado cases, they're seeing things that we can only imagine. And I can tell you, I'll also tell you this, and I want to make it very clear, and I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone on this panel, but folks, please take and consume news critically. The National Weather Service, Austin, San Antonio, did an amazing job. For some folks in the state of Texas, I'm not going to the names, but for some people in the state of Texas, local and state, to have thrown the National Weather Service, Austin, San Antonio underneath the bus originally is inexcusable. I know the 2 people who hit the buttons last Thursday morning, and I trust my life to them. And let me tell you, and Kim will tell you this, and she knows it already, that office is devastated. They're devastated. I'm worried about my friends down there now. And they know that we did the good job. I will tell you another little secret too that hadn't been really known very much, but I find it very interesting. And be interested from Kim's standpoint and Rick's. And I don't know that Rick knows this, maybe, or John, but a few years back, there was a decision because of Flash Flood Alley being, guess what, we own it down here, that, we have 3 levels of flash flood warnings. We have what I call the base flash flood warning. We have the considerable tag, and then we have the catastrophic tag. Paul Ura sat down with us years ago as users, and he sat down with the emergency managers throughout his area, San Antonio, Austin, the Hill Country. And he said, we are still losing too many people. And the emergency manager said, we need these WEA alerts that FEMA has created. We need those on the phones, but we need them for all flash flood warnings. And, back in the day, we know what? WEA does not trigger, help me out, John, it does not trigger for the base flash flood warning. It only triggers for considerable and catastrophic. That was decided, I figure 8 or 9 years ago by the Weather Service and approved by headquarters. National Weather Service in Austin, San Antonio does not issue base flash flood warnings. They do not issue them. This is their office policy. They want all flash flood warnings around here to get the WEA alert. So no matter what you heard, the warning was there. The first warning at 1:14 for Kerr County went out with a WEA. Now, did the WEA work in Kerrville? I assume it did, but we'll have to find that out in the future. But the National Weather Service, Austin, San Antonio did an amazing job. And they did it, by the way, being overall short-staffed by a few people. But I read somewhere, well, there weren't enough people in the office there. Well, help me out here, Rick. On a normal shift day in a WFO, there's normally 2 or 3 people. And
usually,
yeah. Okay.
At least
now,
1 to 2.
Right. And so did we have 1 or 2 people at the office then? No. Did we have 3? No. Did we have 4? No. There were 5 people in that office that night. They surged that office, and to hear that office didn't provide warning tells me that's gaslighting in a way. It tells me there are problems elsewhere. And I'm not going to, James, we're not going to assign blame, but we've got to look at that. The blame does not go to that office. I thank them every day since for what they have done.
Hey, Troy, have you
Yeah.
talked with them since those that work that shift? Have you talked with any of them?
Yes, but I'm probably not going to share many of those discussions if you don't mind. Yes,
I just worry about their mental health.
No,
And listen, you can't shield them from these nitwits that are on social media that says there was nobody at the Weather Service. They
Yeah.
had no warning. I worry about what they were.
Yeah.
You know, we're a little used to it because we're a bit
Yeah.
more public, but now they're having to deal with it.
Well, and I try to stay in touch with them on text. I don't know if everybody always has all the text for all the people in the office, but I tend to. And I tend to send them a note every day and just let them know we're behind them. And I think they know that. But let me tell you, even offices like San Angelo, which are even more short staffed, you know how many people they had on duty? Same time, they had flash flooding going on. So to hear those people, the men and women of the National Weather Service, not putting a warning out, there's something wrong somewhere else. I don't buy that. I know that's not the case. And so, and I'll stand by that as far as I have to, because I think it's real important for people to know. We've got to critically consume news nowadays, folks. There's too much crap on the internet, as we say. And I had real interesting, and I don't want everybody else to get involved here. I had something interesting happen about an hour ago. I was on with a news network, and they looked at me and says, "Is there nothing we can do about this?" And I thought about the enormous question that they had just asked me, and I think we have to. I mean, go back to the fundamental problem. What is it? People don't appreciate moving water. They don't understand it. They do not understand the force of it. And I'll tell you something else, back off this a little bit. If you go look at the over 100 deaths, the majority of them perished at night. And we have for years said that is the biggest time. We think we've lost a fire chief just 15 miles that way from here, someone that I knew a little bit about. And I'd sit there and he was trying to save someone. They found his truck, they found the other car. They haven't found him or the other person as of this afternoon, I don't think. We've got to do a better job, and we got to teach people there's a personal responsibility in having a plan. And not only that, but you got to execute your plan. You've got to get out there and see that it works. And I'm in wrapping up, one thing I'm going to ask is, I want to see some plans for the city of Kerrville. I want to see the plans for Kerr County. I want to see plans I want to see the emergency management plans or emergency operations plans for summer camps. And some people have looked at me in the last couple of days. They said, well, they're not going to share those with you. Well, if you don't share them with me, why would I want to send 500 to 600 first responders in there to clean up the mesh that's been created from this? And so I think we're owed that. We've got to look at all of this. And by the way, is Troy perfect? Heck no, I'm far from it. And there'll be things in the Weather Service we can do better. But was there no warning? I call you know what on that.
No question, and nobody knows it better than you, Troy. But
yeah,
we have the Weather Service chat transcripts. You could see what was happening.
Well, you can go to
time.
Daryl's site. One thing I did yesterday is I have a 115-page PDF on this computer right here in front of me. And there is a product, if you've never seen it. And again, God bless Daryl, because he's done such amazing work to enable us to be able to do this. You can go in there with a command, and we have set up a non-pill. It's called a WAR in Daryl's site. And if you go WAR for EWX, you can go back thousands of versions through all of their watch, warning, and statement products. You can do it for any WFO in the country. And today I saved it since 10:45 last Thursday night till 6 p.m. last night. It's 116 pages of text, of warnings, of statements. Bill, you can't argue with that. It's there. It's there.
I did the same thing Friday,
Yeah.
Troy, because I didn't want it to get away in case we
Yep.
ever
Yep.
lose that, because it's the pure proof. And I want Rick to talk about that in a second. But John Gordon, put this in perspective. I was in Estes Park a few years ago, and a lot of these places are hallowed ground. Where people passed away. Talk about the big floods that, especially in the '70s, that plagued this country.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. First off, my condolences to the folks in Texas. Okay, that's the first thing. We have media demanding to know how many people are dead while they're rescuing people, which is totally insane.
By the way, John, I'm going
Okay.
to interrupt you for a second. In the last half hour, I don't know if you've seen it, but a private drone almost caused the rescue helicopter to go down in Kerrville in the last hour.
Yep.
And I don't think I've been quite as angry as I was here in the last few minutes on social media. That's inexcusable. Thank you, John. Please. Yeah.
Yeah, these people are suffering, folks. This is the real deal. Okay. So a few weeks ago, James Spann and I were talking about this, about all these severe weather nuts, right? Yeah, with the exception of these events like April 27th, you get a few rogue cells, you turn into multi.
Hey, John, we've lost your audio.
Reset. Yeah.
Oh crap! Are we
Yeah,
back?
right as John was getting good. It sounds like a Bluetooth issue. If you got a Bluetooth
Let me come
headset,
back.
that it's a Bluetooth kind of thing.
I was trying to do lip reading of John, which is a dangerous thing.
Yeah,
So it's like
no,
me.
and for those that don't know, a lot of new people are watching this. A lot of people don't know us. Troy, first off, just kind of give your background in terms of your professional background for folks that don't know you.
I'm older than James Spann.
Yep.
I've actually been in Austin since 1984. A graduate of Texas A&M University, taught at UT for 36 years in weather and a non-major program here at UT, and now involved in as an incident response meteorologist and emergency management, working along with several agencies in Austin. But I'm going to tell you what, working just as closely with the National Weather Service, Austin, San Antonio.
And Troy has got a great heart, and he has an amazing grasp of the science. He's a veteran, and his heart is in this. And I hope you can it's visceral. You can feel that passion that Troy has for what's happened here. And I'm just so thankful for you being willing to come on tonight. For a lot of people, this is too hard to do. So we just wanted to get it straight from you. And again, let's see if John Gord's back. John, are you back?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. I don't know what happened. It was an alien here in Kentucky. So in the 70s, okay, all you weather weenies who want to be a meteorologist, I really believe you should do flash flood climatology. James Aladot was talking about the Tulsa event. He'll talk about it here in a little bit. Rapid City, Cheyenne, Wyoming, Shadyside, Ohio, Johnston, Pennsylvania. They don't learn once; they get it twice. Troy will tell you. Troy, did this happen in 1987?
Yes, sir.
So in Kentucky, we have the Frozen Creek flood in the 1930s, killed almost 100 people. They said it was an act of God. I always love that. A lot of people are atheists. We don't believe in God, but when there's a weather event, it has to be God's fault. But anyway, I digress. So what happens in 23 in Eastern Kentucky? Almost the same thing that happened in Texas. When was it? It was overnight. It was overnight. The Whitesburg River gauge did the same thing as it did in Texas. Went like this. It rose 20 feet. And then the river gauge left. So these do happen. And I'm amazed at the number of people who've printed things. We haven't had a flood a fatality like this in 100 years, which is total insane. Has anyone ever heard of the Big Thompson flood? I mean, that should be made into a Spielberg movie. You had 40 to 50 feet of water going down a canyon on Highway 24. So I'm really glad Troy mentioned, rightfully so, as usual, it's always at night. And I pleaded, that's my last thing I'll say here. I pleaded with the service assessment on the Eastern Kentucky flood. I told my buddy, his name is Ken Cook. He used to be the SU in MIC in Wichita, a great guy. I said, Ken, don't write this mumbo jumbo that everyone writes. Focus on one thing. What can we do to save lives in Eastern Kentucky? Come with some kind of a system with the USGS or the Corps of Engineers, where it's either solar or single cellular, however it is, it wakes people up and calls them, or fire alarms or sirens or air raids, anything to get them to higher elevation. That's it. And I just want to say this too, James. The Weather Service, I've researched this really well. They had warnings out, people. For the people who said they did not have warnings, it is fallacious. It is not true.
And John, for those that don't know, John was the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service in Louisville prior to retiring, and he's had a long career with the Weather Service. And so when he speaks, I hope that people are listening, Bill Murray. I hope that they listen to John.
You have to listen to John Gordon. And John, did the assessment you're talking about in the Kentucky floods, did something come of it?
Well, they wrote it in there. Ken did a great job, but it requires money. And I mean, that was not my area. That's the Jackson office. And the Jackson office, very similarly, Troy, was attacked about the warnings. They had great warnings. So it reminds me of an Abraham Lincoln quote: better to be silent and thought of as a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. Before you start making accusations, maybe you should know what you're talking about. Just saying.
But I would also point out to you, it's 2025. And I don't need to say any more than that. We have the internet where people can. I was with my group in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago, and I pointed out that I could say that's the east over there, and that's where the sun rises, and I'd have half the people that would disagree with me, and then I'd be canceled in the next hour. We're going to have to get back to critical thought, and I didn't mean to bring that up tonight, but I think that's part of this process. We've got to give people, and Kim is so damn good at this. We've got to give people the ability to critically think about risk assessment, about how much they perceive risk, and how to make decisions that can save their lives. And as much as I'd love a weather service or emergency management person or a law enforcement person to walk to everybody's house and knock on the door and say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, we need you to get out of the house. That ain't happening. It's not going to happen now. It's never going to happen in the future. There's going to have to be a personal decision with this. This is what affects me so much with this one, is that we lost so many kids, of which parents entrusted camps to take care of their children and to return them when the camp was over with. And we now know that's not going to happen in many cases. That's why I think we need to go back and see some of the plans. We need to see, again, people have asked me all day. I've said, I want to see these plans from some of these camps. I want to see what worked, what didn't work. Not necessarily to cast blame, but to maybe prevent this from happening in the future. Because, if you're a grown adult and you drive into a low water crossing, you've made a decision. But if you're at one of these camps as a child, you're trusting people around you to care for you and to take care of you. And I just feel like we need to figure that out. And it's like Bill said, one thing too that I think is huge with this, and no one's mentioned it yet. When did this happen? It happened in the early morning hours on a federal holiday where in the state of Texas, people wanted to go camping. They wanted to be out. They wanted to do this. There were children at camps. That's what they do every summer on the Guadalupe River. And I think we've got to look at that as well.
And it was not unlike that in the event in Colorado, John Gordon. It was on a holiday also, state centennial.
Well done. Yeah. And that's an excellent point you just made, is think about all the people you know in your life. How many went camping along a creek, a sandbar, a gravel bar, in their life.
Yep.
And then I always love people to tell me I was on the gravel bar and I heard and I saw heat lightning. I'm still waiting to find heat lightning. I've been looking for it all my life. I've never found it.
No.
It's like people who say they see thunder. I'm still waiting to see thunder just once in my life. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, these holiday weekends, people want to go have fun, right? People want to go
Yeah.
have fun.
Yep.
And holiday weekends, whether it's Big Thompson or I mean, it's just sickening about these kids. It's sickening.
Yep.
It's hard to think about.
Yeah.
It's really hard to think about. James A., you have small children. I thought about you. Well, not small children, but you have young children. And I thought about you a lot. I thought about Kim.
Yep.
Many of us have children, but I thought about y'all especially. I knew it was hitting you hard during this. But James A., mention what you just mentioned about the Tulsa sirens. I think that's important. And I know you've looked really hard at what the setup was that caused this event. And I think that's important because a lot of people are saying, could it have been forecast?
I mean, first of all, Tulsa in the 1960s and 1970s was an incredibly flood-prone city.
Yep.
In fact, it probably, I think, had the number one ranking of federal disaster declarations due to flooding for about 2 decades. And as part of all of that, they spearheaded land reclassification, buyouts, if you will, get rid of a lot of that development. And the siren, the outdoor warning siren, say what you will about their usefulness during tornadoes, but during floods, they can set off a different tone for those. And it gets people's attention. It is different from the tornado siren wail. It's more of a British, a UK emergency vehicle siren. And social media just lights up. What is that? What is that? What's happening? And so it works. It gets people to tune in. So Tulsa's had a long history, and as part of the code changes that went on there that can be applied at any other flood prone part of the country, anything built since the code was changed in the mid 80s, to my knowledge, has not had any flood damage. So they raised the freeboard up above the 100-year floodplain by several feet. And to my knowledge, there has been no rising water flood damage. Of course, there's flood damage from roofs and things like that. But this was not, it was uncommon, I think, for Central Texas, but it's certainly not rare. Landfalling tropical storm. We saw Tropical Storm Barry move across Mexico and up that way. And you don't give it that much thought. Oh, it's just a tropical storm. But the world record rain, or at least the Texas record rain, was a tropical storm. I think the Guadalupe River, Troy, help me out here. I think the record stream flows from the Guadalupe River have all been in July.
And yes, I believe so. There's been some fall events. We're big on fall events, and that people don't think about that a lot. But October, November are some time periods we have to watch as well around here. We've had our share down here. But those that have been part of the show all spring, I've talked about what? I can't get any rain out here. I feel guilty about that now that I said that, but can't get any rain around here. I've had 5 or 6 inches now in the last 4 or 5 days, but I've had 18 inches about 15 or 20 miles northwest of here that came Saturday night with the most incredible radar display I'd ever seen in my life. A storm that sat there and just rotated around itself and sat there. And it was the most amazing thing. I think the meteorology of this last week from everyone on this panel, I wish I had someone said I'm smart. I'm not. I'm stupid. I don't understand it. The modeling didn't particularly handle it very well, the short range, high resolution model guidance. But just amazing what we've seen here. And it's after a spring that was so dry. Here we get the rain the first week of July and over the 4th of July. It's amazing. This is normally one of our driest months besides January. I think January and July into early August.
And those tropical systems often flare up overnight. And we had one in Oklahoma, I believe, Aaron, 10, 15 years ago, that strengthened up the tropical storm force and hurricane force gusts.
And that was over Oklahoma.
Yes. And so, we've talked about these flood catastrophes, Big Thompson Canyon in the 70s, the Albert Pike Campground in Arkansas, this one. And you start overlapping vulnerabilities. And one of the big ones is people from out of town. We say that about rip currents. It's people from out of town. We do not have that anchor and that culture, basically, that the residents have. Now, the residents also have another thing, Troy, we talked about that on text, and that is if you have a mortgage for your home, you likely don't have a home in a floodplain.
Exactly. Yeah.
That wasn't the case on campgrounds and for these campsites either.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, one thing that's interesting for me, regulation wise, James, because I think the stuff in Tulsa is interesting. I'm pushing now in the state of Texas that it be state law. It's not, and I have a feeling it's not law in any of your states either, or for our people that are listening and hearing us, that emergency action plans must be available in the county judge's office, which in the state of Texas is largely responsible for emergency management, or in the emergency management office for not only the city and the county, but if you have a camp where you have large amounts of people coming in, I think those should be required by law. I don't care if you're a religious institution. I don't care if you're a private. If you have 200 or 300 kids there during the summer, I believe those emergency action plans should be on file in the emergency management office in that county. And I'm going to push for that in Texas. We need it.
Their kitchens have to be inspected.
Yeah, right. And of course, the big thing that bugs me is that, last Friday, they said, no, we don't have a warning system. We decided we can't afford it. And I'm thinking the last couple of days, well, I'll be honest with you. Yesterday, I thought, well, what do we need? 100 deaths? Well, guess what? Today we have it. I have a feeling the city of Kerrville and Kerr County will have a flood system muy pronto that'll come very, very quickly now. And it's just sad that we have to pay for that in the way that we've had to pay for that, in my opinion.
How many times have you seen it take a tragedy this to get a warning system?
Exactly.
I mean, I always look at hurricanes. Andrew. After Andrew, Florida had the easiest building code in America. Yep. You could get the Three Stooges to put a mansion in, and the inspector would go, "That's a very fine building. It's great." But it took Andrew to get them to have the toughest building code in the country.
Yep.
But this goes for everything. I mean, railroad crossings. It's
saying.
That window of opportunity to push policy forward.
Yep.
And sometimes it takes something
tragedy.
Like that. Yeah. Yep.
We are always reactive, not proactive.
Key. That is so key. And we've got to learn how to be more proactive. Everyone has got to be able to understand the risks that come. And it's not just weather. I tell people this. I said, how many of you in this room have a plan for 1:35 in the morning in your house with your 2 children, your pets, your other significant other with you, and the house starts to burn? I want to know, what is the plan? And people look at me like I have 20 horns growing out of my head. Are you willing to, is that okay to have that 3 people die in that fire? We need to plan better. We've got to plan. And not only that, we got to have a plan. And Rick does this so well, the WCMs across the country around, and you've got to exercise that plan.
Got to practice. So Rick, talk about that for a minute, the role of the WCM in that process and coordinating with the emergency managers. And, what do you know about, you know, that process? I know Troy can speak to it too, but
Yeah.
you know, speak to what you've been thinking over the last few days about this.
Rick,
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear who you were talking to. It sounded like me, but I can certainly talk about being a WCM. No, the WCM, the Warning Coordination Meteorologist, I've been the one in Norman since 2002, is a critical role in the Weather Service. It's actually the only job in a Weather Service office that's like written into law, written into the Weather Act. It's the external, I tell people it's external affairs, sales and marketing, the complaint department, the outreach, the everything external to the office. So all the partner interactions. And I've seen lots of media stories from this event talking about, well, they didn't have a WCM and what role did that play in whatever it is people thought that happened from the Weather Service perspective. WCM is an important role in the Weather Service office in dealing with partners, but they haven't had a WCM since April, I guess, when Paul Ura, who had been there since 2008, I believe, retired. He was an amazing WCM. We'll miss having him. He was kind of the WCM for the entire state of Texas, represented all 13 WFOs. So, but the work that he did and all the forecasters have done at the New Braunfels, Austin, San Antonio office, those relationships don't happen that night of the flooding when the rain's starting. They happen in the hours, weeks, days, months, years before that. So the relationships with the county judges, who in Texas are all powerful, that's no exaggeration to say that. Those relationships with the local media, with the local emergency management coordinators, all of those entities, the WCM is responsible for managing that program and helping that. And in some cases, and it's been the case in our office, but it's getting better, partners get so reliant and they get such a close relationship and trustful relationship with the WCM that that's the only person they want to talk to. So they're texting the WCM on the weekend and instead of just getting in chat and asking a question. It's fine. I don't mind that. But the whole office is responsible for those relationships. So honestly, if Paul had still been in the Weather Service, I have no idea if the outcome would have been any different. I seriously doubt it. Paul's a great guy, but I just don't see that there was anything missing from that perspective, that night. But the WCM leads a team, and it's a team of people in the office that are responsible for providing decision support services, providing watches, warnings, advisories, doing briefings, doing webinars for partners, all of the stuff that we do before events and that were done before this event to some extent, I believe. That's kind of what the WCM is there for.
And all that doesn't go out the window in just 4 or 5 months after his departure, does it, Rick?
No, I don't think so. And Troy, you know this better than I do. Paul was a great guy, but they have a great team there, a great staff. Yeah. They also lost John Zeitler, who's their science and operations officer. Right. So that was a huge blow to the office. They're missing two of the key leadership management. Well, I want to say management positions. There's other leadership in the office, but they have good people. They have good senior forecasters that have been there a long time. They have new younger forecasters, and I can't speak exactly to their programs, but I know that they're out there doing spotter talks, doing flash flood talks, safety talks, doing everything an office does to help the community get better prepared. So I know it's definitely a team effort. Yeah. So no, when Paul left in April, that his legacy lived on in the office. I just have to assume that they just continued on without missing a beat.
So is there anything? Go ahead, Troy.
That it has gone on. And I'm not going to mention any names, but you can go back through those warnings we talked about in the statements. In a lot of cases, you can see last names. They're there, the bottom of the statements, and the persons that signed off on that watch on Thursday afternoon, by the way, 14, 15 hours in advance, mentioning the fact that people on campground should be making preparations. If you need to, you watch. You need to be prepared to go. That's at 1 o'clock or shortly thereafter, a few minutes after on Thursday afternoon. The word is out.
And that's a full 15 hours in advance of the wave of water.
And we know that WEAs went out. We know that weather radio alarmed. I'm assuming, I don't know that. I can't do that. But I'm going to tell you, I think I saw something very interesting in social media today that said, I hope this leads to a renaissance in NOAA weather radio. I'm really hoping it does. Maybe we can grow it and even bring it up to current day with GPS stuff. And I know that we've talked about that on this show. But so there's hope in the future, but I don't think we need to, first of all, over the next couple of days, take care of the people we haven't found yet. We need to do that. That's number one. And number two, then we need to sit back and just have a discussion. We need to have a discussion about why this happened. I think the Weather Enterprise has got to be involved in that. I think emergency management. And sometimes we build kingdoms sometimes, but I think that's got to be a discussion between all of us. I think we all need to be in the same room at the same time.
And one story that we saw today from the Associated Press was at least encouraging. And I'll ask Kim to kind of jump in. There's this place, and I think it's called the Mo Ranch, a Presbyterian camp that acted very proactively. And we learned later that, evacuations weren't ongoing at Mystic, which has received a lot of the news today, stuff that we've heard internally, harrowing experience there, amazing things were happening, heroes were working. But, a key part of this process, and Troy was referring to it about having emergency action plans. I can't think of how many nights I've sat up doing severe weather support for hotels.
I thought of you, Bill.
None of my hotels have ever been hit. It's like my little insurance policy, because as long as I do it, they'll never get hit. If that one night I don't get up, and I don't talk to them, I don't text them, I don't tell them that afternoon, it'll happen. And I'll be devastated. That they've come to count on it. So you have to practice, like you were saying earlier, Troy, you got to practice. But here's this camp, and I can't wait to talk to this employee who reached out to his boss and said, hey, we got a problem here. Because he is a hero, Kim Cloco McLean. I don't know what their plan was, and I assume they had one, but he reached out proactively, and if every organization along the river had that in place, maybe they'd seen the ERO a couple of days out, the excessive rainfall outlook. They just said, we got to watch for, we're going to have to watch for Thursday night. And then Friday afternoon, they might have seen, Thursday afternoon, they might have seen, hey, we got a flash flood watch for tonight now. Wow. We've got to keep somebody up all night. I don't like it, but, we're going to have to tell the security guard, they got to pay attention to this weather radio, whatever that plan is. So Kim, talk about that. Didn't that just do your heart some good, Kim, when you read that story, when it was shared today?
It did. And something that I've talked about some on this show before. So hi to all the people who have just tuned into us for the first time, by the way. I'm both a behavioral scientist and a meteorologist, and I focus a lot on warning systems and what makes them good and what we can do to make them better. And something that we often say in our angle of this field is warnings aren't just a technology, they're a social process. And that means messages are transmitted between people. And what I heard in a lot of media accounts in those camps, what's gone on for years is an informal system of notification where someone upstream sees something, they message to downstream camps. They're used to having folks who are sort of monitoring river conditions instead of trusting in a gauge-based system, that costs a lot of money. They're sort of doing it themselves, and then they transmit messages downstream to other camps. And that has been apparently a really good system for them for baseline kinds of flood threats for years. So what is interesting to me is to think about, where does that have success and where can we build on it? Before I get into that, I, sort of like John said, I want to pause and share a little bit of the human side of this, especially to make some space for some of our weather colleagues who are really going through this. So I want to first just say it's so hard to watch this as a mother of young children, just full stop. And I think anyone who's had kids, loved kids, been around kids, can, feels it, but especially if you have them right in front of you. It's just, it's been inescapably a weight on my chest and a lump in my throat. I just can't get away from it. If you're feeling that, I see you. And also as a meteorologist, and for me, especially, as a specialist in warning systems, I've just, felt humbled by the enormity of the challenge that events like this pose for us. I imagine this is my children. What would I want for my children? How could I make this better for my own children? And it's very hard. I'm not hopeless. I'm not without hope, and I'll talk about that. But I am heartened, Bill, by stories like what you shared about that AP story of the camp. Those are things I think we can build on. They're pathways forward, but it's not simple. So like all of us, I've been thinking through all the angles on this. Like I just gave a preview. I will get to some of those. But I'll admit, with the overarching being a parent and dealing with this, like none of it has felt particularly, I don't know, satisfying, or it's just been hard. So I am going to share a little bit. I was talking about going through this on social media today, and I heard from a former panelist here on WeatherBrains, NBC News guru Nate Johnson, a consummate wise person. He also noted that he's struggling, and even struggling to listen to what people in our own field are saying. Like it's a lot to take in, the emotional levels and the intellectual levels. And I said, if I'm honest, every take, even my own, has been driving me crazy. I don't know how to be, because this is both personal and professional. There's seemingly no thoughts I am prepared to absorb except sorrow. And he said, then we shall sit together and absorb sorrow. And I loved that. And so I want to just make a moment. We can just sit and absorb sorrow, and that's okay. Now, as we do have a show to run, and we can't just sit here in silence, as the occasion warrants, I'm going to go on to irritate myself. So, a couple of things I am thinking about. Warning for floods is hard, and I think that this goes underappreciated a little bit in our field, but it's actually harder than tornadoes in a lot of ways, especially if the goal is to inform the decisions people have to make. In the case of a tornado, no matter what its intensity, your decision is always the same, and it's to hunker down. And maybe you have to flee a shoddy building, or if you're outside, get inside, but it's pretty straightforward. And it's more unidimensional, like what direction. You can just infer the storm is going this way, the tornado will be attached to it. That problem is, it's complicated, but not hugely so. But decisions in flash floods are an order of magnitude worse. There are more physical dimensions to worry about, and we don't necessarily give people all the information that they need to make an informed decision, like knowing where the water is all across the landscape. For tornadoes, we give you that radar imagery. You can see where the storm is going. We show you where the rotation is. Water on the landscape, we observe almost nowhere. And that stuff isn't public. We're not showing rain gauges on TV. We're really not in river gauges. Like we're not giving that information, and it's hard to get. So it's hard to talk about, well, where is the water and where will it go? In order to make a decision to go somewhere away from the water, you have to know both of those things. And that is just not something that we have. I think something that I've heard a lot talked about in these events, or since this event, something that has been widely discussed is, maybe people didn't evacuate because they get a lot of flash flood warnings, and then they just they choose not to do anything. And this is an example of a cognitive deficiency, like normalcy bias or optimism bias. And I'm here to tell you the technical definitions of those things are that people are subjectively underweighting the likelihood of a thing. So instead of accurately estimating the probability, they're pretending the probability is lower, or they're imagining that it's lower than it actually is. And I have to say, guys, these are rare events. They are extremely rare. If anything, the fact that people respond at all is almost an overestimation of the likelihood of some of these things actually impacting them. I've done the math for tornadoes. It is an overestimate. We are so lucky people take shelter from tornadoes because the area we warn is so big. They are so rare. False alarms are such that, but they're very concerned for them. They don't want to die that way. I don't think they want to die in floods either. And I don't think it does us a lot of good to sort of, victim blame a little bit, but I don't think people mean to. I think that if we sit down and are honest with ourselves, the math is that it's actually very rational to, if you get a whole bunch of flash flood warnings, they're all quite the same as you covered, Troy, regardless of circumstance, and they're all delivered the same way, nothing stands out about it, then you have experienced that so many times. And so the signal has lost its value for these nth order events. So where I haven't lost hope is what the community was considering in things like the siren systems. Those siren systems you mentioned, Troy, have really worked in Tulsa. The community of Wimberley, I understand, about 75 miles away from this area that was affected from Kerrville, they had a deadly flash flood event that was really similar, and they installed a flood warning system. And the way these work is that along a waterway, very specifically like rivers that are known to flood, you have a stream gauge upstream of your population center, and it triggers when there's a stream flow rate that exceeds a certain threshold, so you know a wall of water is coming, basically. So that solves a couple problems for you right there that a warning doesn't. If you have a system that takes that information and then sends an alert downstream ahead of that water, and you do something like sound a siren, so that people know it's something that's different from the regular baseline warning. It's geographically targeted, and it is attached to an observation of something that's really happening right now there. Like, that's one of the problems with the water, like what to do about water. You need to know where it is and where it's going. Well, at least we can do something for the specific issue of being along a river. If you install a siren system right there along the river, and you know what it's for, and you've practiced it, and you know that it's, this is something that, by the way, the Pacific Northwest does for tsunamis. All of the hotels up and down the coast have signage, and they have plans for what to do if there's a tsunami warning, because you've got no time to respond. You've got to get everybody up. You can do that along waterways too. You can do that along rivers. So if you had that system that just very basic technology sounds a siren ahead of the wall of water, then people know, okay, it's the river. We've got to just get people away from it. And yes, it's not perfect, but it's going to get you pretty far. And that extra signal, sirens are created for this. They're created as an outdoor alert system for people who are, outdoors or in rudimentary housing, don't have technology, haven't powered their phones. Like, this is what they're made for, guys. On this show, we've spent a lot of time discussing the good, bad, evil, whatever of sirens. This is what they're actually really, really useful for. And it would have been really, really useful, I think, for people to have had that additional signal. A lot of people talked about getting buzzed on their phone. They got the typical flash flood the warnings when they went out. They were woken up. So imagine how powerful it would have been to have that additional signal from the environment around them that said, it's right here, it's right now. And that's what I think is missing. And I think yes, there's been some hand, like fist ringing, finger ringing, whatever, about, oh, would it really have helped? And I really, guys, I just really think it would have. It's my professional opinion, because in this case of flooding, we don't give people so many critical pieces of information. If we have a cue we can put into the environment that at least simplifies some of the decision problem down to, it's this waterway, it's right here, it's right now, it's certain, I think we can handle this kind of case. My personal opinion.
It is drummed into you if you go to the Oregon coast, Kim, like you said. in the hotels, everywhere. The signs, the money they've spent on those programs, and it's a big threat, obviously, a big earthquake. It's going to be a huge disaster. But I hope people are prepared. James A., you asked a very important question, and then Rick made a very, very important point, and I want to bring that out. And then I know Jen really needs to say something here because she has some ties to the area. So James A., you go first.
Yeah, and I want to first of all follow up on Kim's statement too, because it's proven time and time again in social science that multiple channels result in faster protective action decisions. And let's roll back to when these things are happening. They're happening at night. You're not getting visual cues. Kim, we've talked about this too with certain severe thunderstorm events. And I'll even put it in my Facebook post that this event will not be like the ones you're used to. These storms will move on you fast. And so don't be deceived because it looks so nice outside. But that's what's happening. Part of what's happening, we're missing a second channel, which is that visual, maybe even audio cue in the case of sirens. The more separate ways you are getting a danger signal, the better. Now, there's something else you wanted me to talk about, Bill. I'm old and I forgot.
About our severe thunderstorm warnings and flash flood warnings sort of similar
Yeah, okay.
in
And
the
I've had this
response process?
discussion. I've had this discussion with Michaela on my team because we talk a lot about false alarm and warning fatigue, and it's not just a weather thing. You get this in hospitals with medical alarms that at a point nurses stations may not hear those if there's so many of those. So it's not just a weather thing to be fatigued with alarms and alerts. But when you have a severe thunderstorm warning and a flash flood warning, if I have a flash flood warning, I'm already on high ground. That's just noise to me. I'm not used to doing anything for that. But if I'm camping in a flood zone, my first inclination is, oh, okay, it's another flash flood warning, not, oh, but my location has changed. So that's another channel of information you have to process. I think it's somewhat akin to a severe thunderstorm warning. We look back at the Branson duck boat disaster, and for more than 99% of the people in that severe thunderstorm warning polygon, that warning was no big deal. But when it affects you, it's there.
Yep.
And Rick, you brought up an important point. Having kids that go to camp, I hadn't really thought of that, but you may know something officially, or you may be surmising something. But bring up that point.
Well, yeah, I saw this online and somebody posted a copy of a document from Camp Mystic specifically. And actually, in the multi-page checklist that campers are given before they come, they are told very explicitly that they're not allowed to have iPhones, iPads, anything Wi-Fi connected, smartwatches, anything like that. They can have an old school iPod just to listen to music, but no connection really to the outside world. Now, would that have made a difference in this case? Who knows? And does that same restriction apply to the counselors? I don't know how many counselors they had. And we've heard a lot about the counselors in the news, and some of them were truly heroes in what they did, and some lost their lives likely trying to save these children. But think about the counselors at a typical camp like this. They're probably 18, 19 years old themselves. They're kids. So what kind of training did they have? What must that have been like? That's a whole nother dimension to this. So yeah, I think there's interesting things to think about. The siren thing just makes so much sense in this particular case. Kim, you were talking about flash flood warnings being more complicated. They definitely are. They don't. I got a question from a TV station in Oklahoma City today to ask us what's our criteria for issuing a flash flood warning and what's our criteria for doing the considerable tag. And I really had to sit there for a little bit. It's not X number of inches and X number of minutes or hours over X area. It's really just kind of vague. Well, if there's flooding, and if the flooding's a little bit worse and it looks like we really want to activate people's phones, we'll do a considerable tag. And if it's really bad and they're pulling people, and our criteria may be different than the Austin San Antonio office, than Dallas, than Portland, Maine. And then the meanings of those flash flood warnings are probably different in each spot. We have very few, I could probably count on part of one hand the number of locations that we're aware of in our county warning area where something like this, not on this scale, but some version of this could happen. Down near Turner Falls in south central Oklahoma, there's church camps down there, very similar situation. The terrain is not the same. So the majority of our flash flood warnings are not for the wall of water sweeping down a canyon in the middle of the night. It's to tell drivers not to drive into the water.
Right.
Most of our flash flood warnings are motorist flash flood warnings. Most of the time, there's not really a lot of concern to wake people up in the middle of the night for a flash flood warning, unless you're in a flood prone area. So, but that's very different in the New Braunfels office because they have a different problem. So this is super complicated. It's much more than, was there a warning? Was there not? What was the lead time? It's so much more complex than that.
Rick, one thing that I think is important, and I wonder sometimes, Kim, whether, we're a victim of our own circumstances sometimes. Within the last 2 weeks, our governor in Texas signed a law that basically says you cannot have cell phones in the public schools. The students can't. And I'll tell you something I learned in emergency management at UT and in the classroom for 36 years, for the last 10 or 15 anyway, when cell phones got to be a big thing. I prohibited the use of computers, any technology in my classroom. I did that in about 2015. Only thing I allowed you to come in there with was a notebook to take notes. Well, the first thing I noticed, number one, is the GPA in the class went up once I got rid of that. But I made a change after that, sitting down with emergency management. And I told my students beginning about a year and a half later, I said, let me tell you something. I want everything turned off. I don't want to see a laptop. I don't want to see a pad. But I want you to have your phone with you. And I want you to put it on silence. I do not want you to turn it off. And I want you to have it on you. Because if someone walks in this classroom and intends to do harm to us, they're probably going to shoot me. That's one thing we know in classroom shootings. They're going to go after the person that is at the front of the classroom because that way they can create chaos in the classroom. We know that through past studies. And I want you to be able to have a way to reach someone then. Or if I'm teaching, to be able to tell me if something else is happening on campus. So I want you to have that cell phone, but I want you to have it and have it turned. I want it on vibrate, but I want it on and I want it on you. I'm not sure this deal with no telephones in the classroom is not going to turn around and bite us sometimes in the future. And I'd be very interested to hear the much smarter people that are part of this panel, whether you agree with me on that. But that was my rule for my last 3 or 4 years in the classroom, is that I allowed phones, but they had to be on vibrate.
That's a really good point, Troy, for sure.
I want someone to be able to pick up and call 911 in case something goes really badly, really quickly. If Troy hits the floor, I'd rather someone be able to call, 911 on campus or
That's
things
a good
like
point,
that.
Troy. Self-preservation.
Yeah, it is to some degree, but I'm more worried about some of the things that I read through the years about what we knew about shooters on campuses.
Right.
And things like that. So it's just a thought. I wonder sometimes, this is the same thing about schools being closed. It is sort of the same thing about schools being closed in severe weather. I think there are a lot of people out there that think that's the best thing, but you're sending people to buildings where you don't know how structurally sound they are. And the good news is a lot of schools are pretty much built like, I'm not going to say what I'm thinking, but they're well built, and they may be kids are probably not going to be supervised at home. I think it's a mistake for schools to close sometimes in severe weather outbreaks when that may be the safest location for some of those kids.
Good point, Troy. James A.
Yeah, I was just going to say, my kids go to church camp. They're at a lock-in now, where they run around and do some mission things in Tulsa. And I bother our counselors and sponsors to no end. Like, you call me.
Hmm.
If there's any weather, I'm bugging them beforehand, I'm bugging them during, and call. I'm here. This phone is not going to leave my side while my kids are
Yep.
with you.
That's what we're here for. Dr. Kim.
Really quick follow on to something that Rick mentioned. The fact that flash flood decision problems are sort of different in different places, and in a lot of places, it's really to try to keep motorists off the roads. I've heard this in some of the media interviews with local officials in this case, where they were saying, it's not simple to just tell people, okay, here's a warning, get away from the water now, because they might drive into other water. And that's a very real thing. I think I just want to point that out, that I'm hearing, as a decision scientist, I'm listening to these interviews with an ear for what are the things they're weighing, the factors they're weighing that went into the decision. And especially when we're talking about rare events, when the odds are so low that it's going to be this thing you've never seen, you're going to think about, the most common problem, which in flash flooding is the roads. And I think that that's something that's worth thinking about here. It's easy to look back with rosy glasses and say XYZ should have been done. But what is it that actually works 97% of the time? You know, we lose more people to flooding on roads than hurricanes and tornadoes in any given year.
Yeah.
So it's worth thinking about. Just putting it out there.
And Jen Nairmore, I know it's been especially hard for you because you have a partner radio station in Kerrville, and you have a long-standing relationship with the citizens of that community. And when you do that each and every day, you build a rapport with that community, even when you're speaking to them one way most days. Talk about that for a minute, how this has affected you.
Yeah, it's been hard. I felt like I've did not do enough, and I haven't felt this awful since April 27th, 2011. And I was on the air in WRSA in Huntsville, and at one point I was on broadcasting by myself, and then I did do lives at that point, and then the station went off the air, and you're left with this sinking feeling. But this feels worse because I've been on the air with this station group for several years, and for the most part, it's very easy. We have to cover 5 different counties in 17 seconds. And how do you pick and choose what you're going to try to say in that amount of time? And I will say that Thursday, I do the PM and the night files, and I did my forecast, and I know I mentioned flooding, but I don't think I hit it hard at all. And then I don't do the morning on Friday. I did the midday, and I mentioned the flash flood emergency. So I managed to get that in to the best of my ability for, I don't know who heard me. You can't do a radar discussion. You can't talk about when a thing's going to end. You can't give anything other than the flash flood emergency information. And so I felt like I did okay there. I don't know if I did the night right. I just don't feel like I did enough. And, but I can't beat up on myself.
No.
All I can do is just know that I care about the community, and it's just been really difficult to watch the death toll keep going up and watching those sweet babies' faces. And I think that radio still has a role, and I'm saddened to the fact that for many cases, radio is really they talk about shoestring budgets.
Yep.
They just don't put the money in, and they don't have the time, and it's no one's to blame here. It's just the way that it's become for the radio medium. And I didn't do any lives for the station or anything like that, and that's just not what we're contracted to do. And as far as I know, the radio station group is all good and what have you. But radio in an emergency, when your cell phones are down and you can't get television or whatever, you can still sometimes get radio signals. Now, I don't know what radio station you're going to get at a campground, but maybe you can get, and if you have a NOAA weather radio, some of those are attached to your AM FM signals, and maybe you can get a radio station and you can get at least some kind of information that's coming out. And if somebody is there's a lot of ifs here, but I don't want people giving up on radio. I think radio is still a medium that is important to the entire, warning process. And then just Bill, the other thing I will say, as owner of Tornado Talk, my focus is on the people impacted by tornadoes. But it was really difficult for me today, guys, not to sit my whole afternoon and find the names of every single person that died. So I knew their names before we got on the show tonight. And that's just all I wanted to say about that.
Thank you, Jen. That's I know it's the hardest part for me was seeing that picture from the camp with the little girls, room, and it looked like all of our kids' stuff was there. And it looked like all of our kids' stuff was there. And just the most beautiful mishmash of just stuff. And each one of those little bunks was alive. And that's what was so hard. So we have to remember each and every one of them. So thank you, Jen. Whew. I know I was supposed to go somewhere now. Troy, where we go now? You had some important comments today. I think that are in our chat. I think our little WeatherBrains chat has been one of the coolest things we've done, and
Yeah,
it's been therapy the last 4 or 5 days. Just sharing information, venting, crying, being angry, all at the same time. You've expressed the need for one important step in going forward. Talk about that for a minute. I'm sure a lot of the other panelists are going to want to weigh in on this.
yeah. And Bill, you actually have been one of the people that have really pushed me to this, because I have a file on this computer right here, and it's called the NCDC. It basically was all my climate data, and it's all the stuff NCEI now. But I have a folder in there that's called service assessments. And Bill and everyone on this group have talked about before, they're just amazing documents through history. And what we've seen in history is largely that the National Weather Service or the Weather Bureau, or Weather Service through time, has done the review on a lot of these things. Well, one thing that we've seen in recent years is that we're not seeing those as much anymore. I don't think there's one being prepared for the storm, the hurricane in the Carolinas. I wonder about that. My whole thing is, how many lives do we have to lose to get those? So I think there's been priorities placed elsewhere than doing that. But I've always been very impressed. And we all have the friend Paul Suffren from NTSB, and he has been on this program with all of us, a meteorologist serving in the National Transportation Safety Board. It's an independent group board that is not in the FAA. A lot of people mistake that. They think it's in the FAA. It's really not. It's an independent agency. And any time that we get a plane crash, any type of event, I mean, you say, well, does it take 50 people getting? No, it's anything turbulence related. They do reports, and they step in experts. And by the way, the FAA is a party to that board, and they are participating, but so are the airlines, so are the controllers unions, and a bunch of other people. And it works very well in a sense. And I think James from Tulsa pointed out to me in our chat earlier, our internal chat, that, well, Troy, there's a lot of stuff the NTSB tells the FAA they need to do, and the FAA, I won't show you the hand signal that they give them back, Bob, probably, but they do that, and things don't necessarily always get done. But the thing I've always respected is the NTSB maintains a website. You can go find it, and they list all their recommendations, and it's either checked green or it's marked red X. And it says whether these things were followed through by the FAA. Folks, I'm going to, my friend Mike Smith, and we talk about Mike on the show occasionally. He has really strongly pushed for a national disaster review board, basically, or committee. And it would be the same sort of thing modeled for an independent agency. And people say, well, what have you got against the Weather Service? I have nothing against the Weather Service. But I think it would be important the Weather Service really in those surveys have not really gone through in the service assessments and gotten a lot of external people involved. Now I'll tell you, in the media, in the Gerald tornado, I was contacted and I did an interview. But I mean, we need people that are the reviewers that are part of the broadcast community and are part of the engineering community, people like Tim and people like that can be involved, and emergency managers, and have this independent committee so we can go back and look at events like this and be very transparent about the Weather Service. Are there things that the Weather Service could do to improve? Sure. But there's a hell of a lot more probably I could do to improve. And so, to be able to have an independent commission, I think is very important at this stage. Will it get done before we review this event in some form or fashion? Probably not. But I think we have no choice. We're going to have to review this, and I'm going to be interesting to see how that happens. But I really believe, and I'm going to go forward assisting Mike in really pushing for this National Disaster Review Board to look at things. It's environmental. The NTSB handles what? Help me out, the ships and airplanes and trains and stuff like that, transportation. This would be more of environmental stuff that would be covered by this board. So I'm there, and not everyone, all my WeatherBrain family, and that's what you are, your family, may not agree with me here, but it's just something I think is important at this stage of the game, Bill.
I happen to agree with you, Troy, and especially after this weekend. John Gordon, you had some thoughts here on a couple of topics.
Where John's mic go?
He's not muted, but he is very garbled.
I think it's a Bluetooth issue with John.
Yeah, it sounds like he's far, far away.
We'll get him wired up.
Yeah.
Okay. Kim, do you want to go for a second while John straightens out his audio here?
I think she's scrambling to find a power cord.
Oh no!
Sorry, guys. Okay, I'm back. We are such a professional organization here at WeatherBrains. Hi, everybody.
If you like a well-planned show, this is not
well planned. We're a well-oiled machine. You guys haven't gotten the normal, like we think that we're really funny. At least I think we're funny, but we go for a lot of humor. Of course, today's not the day for it. So yeah, I'll jump in, John, while you're getting all of your stuff straightened out, since mine got straightened out. So service assessments are a really interesting thing, and I agree with you, Troy, that they have a really long legacy of sharing a lot of really historic, like they're really important historical documents. They put forward a lot of our internal stuff. But the recommendations that are made, since they are so unilateral, just from the Weather Service, they're not necessarily acted upon because there's nobody holding any strings to it. Like, they don't have teeth. And because it's just us, like, disasters are multifaceted. We aren't in control of everything to do with how the whole system has functioned, how response occurs. A disaster occurring in society does not mean we did anything wrong. And we don't necessarily go into these things with really direct objectives. Like, what are we even looking for?
Yeah.
What would constitute a problem? What would constitute something anyone did wrong? The things we measure, are all about what we can measure of, like, how, like, a forecast quality kind of stuff. And did we get stuff out the door on time? And we've recently, in the last 10, 15 years, included people like me on service assessments. I was part of the Harvey service assessment team. We're starting to ask more questions about, really the point of these should be about, did people have the ability to make informed decisions? The wording that's now codified as part of the Weather Act. That's what's supposed to be the point of our whole system. And it's not enough for us just to go out and document disaster has occurred. That people have free will, and we don't control the circumstances of everybody. And so I think, from my perspective, I come at the NTSB, thing. I really want that too, but I don't just want it for accountability. I want it because from my field, sort of disaster sciences and risk communication, the decision problem people face, and like what the consequences are, and who should be doing something after a disaster to make things better next time, does not just fall to forecasters. And we take it all on our shoulders, and we take all the blame, all the guilt, because we're able to see that something bad is coming. Well, guess what? We do not control all the machinations of society. There's a whole bunch of agencies, people, organizations that are part of that. And they've got to be brought to that table, just like you talked about, Troy, with aviation. They're all brought to the table to co-evolve solutions. Some of the greatest advancements in aviation happened because everyone at the table knew what was coming, they agreed, and things were worked through the system. And guess what? Disasters, there's a whole system here too. So it's not just enough to have the forecast out and give people time. We've got to give them actionable information and capacity to respond. And that's where all of our partners come in. And that's where, mitigation comes in, and everything that has, those campgrounds were put there. You guys talked about that. Like all the decisions that were made about exposure happened in some cases centuries before the forecast came out. So we've got to get a lot more people to that table if we really, really, really want to solve disasters.
Yep.
And until that point, we are, forecasters. Yes, we can look at what we've done and try to do the best we can. But I really, really want this for us to be successful, and just also for our hearts to have peace.
James A., you want to add your comment there? I think it's very appropriate before John Gordon jumps back in.
Yeah, and it's important for us to remember that receivers of these warnings have to comprehend the warning, like Kim said, in a way that either prompts them to take action if needed or prompts them to not take action if that's the appropriate conduct. We're doing a whole lot better job of communicating in the language that receivers of these warnings understand, thanks to people like Kim and the social scientists involved in reconfiguring all of these convective warnings. But it's so complex, as wide a variety as people there are, that communication language that's comprehensible is just as wide as that variety. And people that are masterful at this, Apple, you watch an Apple commercial and you realize I'm going to feel awesome if I buy the latest Apple product. Those communications resonate with people, and we've got to get to that space with convective warnings with everybody, but that's complicated.
We'll keep doing what we do. And John Gordon, think the aliens are gone?
Kentucky aliens have left. So, Troy, I agree. I'm going to watch what I say. I implored one of the regions in the Weather Service to do a service assessment about a bad tornado event to get people from the outside. They didn't listen to me. And then I told them, if this would have happened in the Louisville area, I would have paid out of my own money to get people from the outside in. We don't grade our own calculus tests, do we? If I did, I would have much better grades. I think you have to look at your whole thing from the outside looking in. Secondly, Rick had a really good question earlier from the press about a flash flood warning. There is no set definition. Okay. We issued the first flash flood emergency in the country. Bet you didn't know that. The 2009 Louisville flash flood, first one. And why did we issue the flash flood emergency? It's because one of the TV Mets told me, John, there is a propane tank floating down 3rd Street. And I thought to myself, well, that's really bad. And so that's what we did. And people weren't taking the warning seriously until we went emergency. And then interstate shut down. All the news stations were under a flash flood emergency. So there is no one size fits. Some people use that. Observations, you got the MPDs from WPC. There's all these different tools you use. Thirdly, from about 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., it's dark. So you have 9 hours a day that is completely dark. Where are the flash flood depths? Are they at 2 p.m. or are they at 2 a.m.? And these big tornado events, a lot of the big ones, these QLCSs at night, where are people dying? They're dying in the middle of the night. Flash flooding, middle of the night. Kentucky flood, middle of the night. Texas, middle of the night. Also, I want you to comment that was mentioned earlier about people not familiar with the area. Okay, you got people on vacation. Bill Murray brought that up earlier. travelers, we have got to do a better job with the travelers. Bill Murray does a great job with his hotels and all his support. He's one person. Think about all the campgrounds. Think about when you're driving on the road. When I'm going to Jim's, James Spann's favorite barbecue place, when I'm going to Jim's and I drive through DeKalb County and Jackson County, Alabama, which are hilly, right? The mountains, James, the mountains. And southern Tennessee and Missouri. Think about all the hilly terrain and all the low water bridge crossings. We have got so many areas that are flash flood prone that people are just completely uninformed. I'll be nice, Kim, uninformed that is a flood area, right? So we have got to all do a better job communicating the risk of flash flooding at dark.
And John Gordon, I went to Jim's US 82 barbecue on Friday, just to see if James Spann would recognize it.
I
when
was
sent him a
there
picture.
Saturday. I was there Saturday.
I knew when you were in Pine Level, you had to be somewhere near. You had to be near it.
Yes.
But I thought, wow, James really hit it out of the park with this recommendation because it was just as good. But before I come to you, James Spann, Jen's got a note from one of our panelists, and it's very important. I think she needs to read it, and then I'm gonna toss it to you, James.
Yeah, we just got this email from Dr. Neil Jacobs. I'm in DC doing hearing prep and can't see my laptop screen because my eyes keep tearing up listening to the show. My kids are at camp right now. I can't imagine what these families are going through.
Wow, that's amazing.
And
It touches us all. I think
Yep.
Troy wants to say one more thing or ask
I've
one
got
more
a
thing.
question, and this is the old brain. It just, I don't know. It hit on something, and I want to ask John and Rick a question. And it goes back to the old days at WSO Austin, when back in the 80s into early 90s, which was the last time really that I ever sat out there in a weather service setting during warning operations. I just haven't. I'll be honest with you. I haven't been in warning operations down there watching what's going on. But I do remember back in the old days at WSO Austin, when they would sit there in front of that teletype and have to do that tape and send the warning, that many cases, and maybe this is just the old days, but in many cases, I remember people like, and these are people that are gone now, but Jim Dugan and Mel Dunnigan and people that are friends that through the years at WSO Austin, when they would issue warnings, they picked up the phone. And in serious cases, they would reach out to emergency managers. And I'm wondering, with everything that happens nowadays, Rick and John, I wonder, it just came to my mind a second ago, because I haven't even asked that question, not that I would. But do we still, in severe cases like this, still pick up the phone and call emergency managers? I would be surprised if we don't.
Go ahead, Rick.
We don't do it as much as we should. I mean,
Okay,
there's texting some texting that goes on now.
Okay.
There's some personalized communication. Of course, we have chat now. We have other ways to do that, but there's nothing more valuable and powerful than the EM seeing that you're calling them specifically.
Right.
And it's like, oh, darn, this must be, this must be
Yeah.
important. So yeah, I see that there's great value in it for sure.
And I just don't know. I'm just wondering if that's still done that much. And I realize if you've got, especially in Norman, Rick, an event where I'm sitting there and watching the work that y'all are doing up there, and you got 3 tornado warnings within 15 minutes that are being issued. And I understand that it can happen, but I just kind of wondered. I just splashed back to the old WSO days, and it just came to me that I haven't asked that question.
So, Troy, what I did, I would call the state director of emergency management.
Okay.
And I'm just like, I'm really worried about the squall line in these counties in the next 4 hours.
Right.
Or the governor of Kentucky really is interested in winter weather. So I would always give him updates about, how much snow or ice or whatever. But yeah, we don't do it as much as we should. There's no question.
Okay.
I did that, no telling how many times last spring to the relatively new state of Oklahoma emergency management director. We talked on the phone a lot, but that was more leading up to
Right.
up to an event. It was that, that personal contact.
And I'm not talking about whether the WCM or even the forecasters talk to the people at the state level emergency management, because I know that goes on. I know it goes on. But I'm just wondering on the individual warnings. Thank you for your response.
So, a couple of things here. First off, from my perspective, I am in more elementary schools than everybody on this show combined.
Yep.
I've been doing this 47 years. I'm doing 1 to 2 schools a day, sometimes 3. Today, did a summer program, and this hit really hard. These girls are, 8, 9, 10 years old. One of them is from my market here, Cherokee Bend Elementary School. I've been to that school so many times. I probably owned bricks in the building, and it was really hard. It wears on you mentally, and I think it's worn on all of us, and that's why I worry about my friends Troy that work at the Weather Service in Austin, San Antonio. Goodness gracious, I just worry so much about them. And then on top of that weight, that burden, then you've got the lunatics, these extremists, political. That's all they do. They're brainwashed. They're programmed just to sit. Everything's politics. My left shoe is political here to them. And the left wingers. The event was because of what, Trump. There was no warning. The Weather Service was closed because of the big beautiful bill. God was punishing Texas for voting Republican. And then the right wingers come in with chemtrails, cloud seeding. The DNC made it rain. HARP. And they honestly believe this. I have had more attacks personally over the last 3 days than I've had over the last 3 years. And these are brutal, vicious attacks, brutal from both sides. And I'll tell you, it's getting really old real quick. But so Troy, so to those people that say this was chemtrails and cloud seeding, Texas has got a cloud seeding operation, and they made it. It was man-made. What do you say to them?
I would say to go back to maybe 6th grade science class and work up from there. Try to get a little more educated on the science. We have cloud seeding operations going on around Texas, and we have in many states that we have it. But believe me, this is not something. I like John Gordon's comment, but I'm not going to repeat it. But that science class, 6th grade, you might want to kind of work up from there.
Troy, really quickly, can you explain why? Like, there are people who I've known who have advanced degrees who are like, I Googled and I saw cloud seeding. Like, you guys can make clouds. Why is this different?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we don't make clouds. In cloud seeding, and people say, well, they go drop it in clear air. No, they don't. The atmosphere has to be almost in a prime position for you to do this sort of operation. And and the thing about it, Mother Nature never telegraphs to any of us about what she is exactly going to do. Otherwise, our lives over the last 5 days would have been much easier. So we're dealing with an inexact science in the first place. But please just read up on it a little bit, and if nothing else, just remember that all of us, we have our chemtrail switches.
But people have lost their ability for empathy. That within minutes, the political activists were on it, right wing and left wing. And if you don't agree with them, if you don't agree that it's Trump or cloud seeding or DNC, RNC making it rain, then they want to hurt you. They want to hurt you verbally. Then they want to hurt you physically. Yeah. And some of the threats I've received, I've had to turn into law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I'm just a weather guy. What's happened to society? What has happened? These people don't give a red rip about any of these children that were killed. They don't care. All they care about is their candidate, orange man bad or good or whatever. And it's sickening. This is what we've become. Yeah. Troy, I hope that, again, the guys, the Weather Service guys in New Braunfels and these parents don't have to see this stuff, but they will.
Well, I think I think they're looking at it. They understand, and they have a lot of support. I'll tell you one thing that's really cool is the broadcast community in Austin. is really a very tight knit community. In some markets, Rick will tell you that TV people are not allowed to even talk to be around one another. Everyone knows everyone here, and even in San Antonio, it's the same way. So I think we have very unique markets, and I have not seen one person out of those markets here that haven't responded in defending the National Weather Service, Austin, San Antonio. So I'm going to let it go at that.
Good. And one more question. I want to turn it over to Kim, but and maybe this was discussed and I just missed it. Do we know if they had a weather radio at Camp Mystic?
We don't know that. We need to know that. I want to see emergency operation plans. There's a lot of stuff that I want to see. I will tell you something that we talked about. We talked about earlier. Friday was probably one of the most eye-opening days for me, for folks that had a chance to watch that press conference on Friday morning that got a little out of hand with the county and the local people. They were angry at the media for asking questions. And it was at that point I sat in this chair and looked at those sets. And I told myself, no one gets that angry if there's not something else going on. And so we need to look at that. I'm not saying there is, but I want to know what's going on in the communities. So we don't have to have this happen again.
And again, the weather radio thing,
Yeah.
you know, how many times have we had Bruce Jones on this show
Exactly.
going through the importance of having a weather radio? Your cell service is going to be not reliable, especially in a place like that where the cell service is spotty anyway.
Yeah.
And you know, these RF transmitters, they're good. They serve weather radio receivers, and it just seems to me that thing would have gone off multiple times. And if you're in a place where there's a history, this ain't the first rodeo here. Again, if you're just joining us live, go back and watch the beginning when Troy laid out the history of the flooding along the Guadalupe River. You know, you go back to 1987, 1978, all these events.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's happened before and it's going to happen again. This won't be the last time. And you got a bunch of children out here and you've cut them off with no way of getting warnings. A flash flood watch was issued the day before that afternoon. And, you know, and again, I don't know. Maybe they did. We just don't know that yet. But all this will come out in the future. And people like Kim will review it all and come up with solutions. And we do want to get better. But again, I just think this is a time to just pray for these families and these people, and let's grieve with them. And just, can we stop the politics? Can you stop the politics? Can you stop the stinking politics? Nobody cares who you voted for. Nobody cares your politics. Just stop it for a few days. All right, Kim, I'm sorry I'm done.
I'm gonna let Kim Gop in there, but do me a favor. I'm getting tired up on the stand at Kerrville, Texas, about seeing politicians. I don't want to see politicians anymore. I want to see emergency
and I know,
managers.
Troy, you've got to go here in what, 2 minutes? But thank you for your time. I know this has been draining on you. How are you doing?
I think I'm doing pretty good because I pretty much have my moments when I need to, when I feel like I need to. And so, and y'all are great because you've allowed me to do that tonight, and our WeatherBrains family and all the people that listen and they also watch. But I really want to give Kim some time tonight. So,
all right, Troy. Well, thank you. Again, we have another important note here that Kim, you need to share with the world. So just please pour out your heart. Tell us.
Well, need to is maybe strong, but it's just like Troy said. I value, like you do, Troy, the family we have here and the opportunity to share things. And there's something that I've wrestled with whether to share it here, but I've talked enough about my job that I feel like I really should. And this isn't a commentary on politics, but I think just some of the things that go on behind the scenes that aren't widely reported on, but are reality, is something that I'm going through now. So I think people are really familiar with the fact that there were, you know, the first wave of different kinds of rifts and retirements and everything that went on that has left so many parts of our organization sort of short-staffed, reeling. Behind the scenes, there's been a lot of reorganization that's gone on in the Weather Service as a result. And we're to the point now, not just in our agency, I'm sure many, but I'm seeing this from our perspective. We're to the point now where there were a lot of people who were working to do things like make our systems better, that our colleagues are gone. The projects we were working on are forestalled. If you're an organization that's working to survive and put out basic forecasts for things like this catastrophic flood. You don't have the capacity anymore to spend extra time to be doing the planning for the future. And I think as part of that, I wasn't at all surprised to hear that my position was going to be part of like a secondary wave of things to go out of the Weather Service. And it's happening at the same time as there have been a lot of contractors, people I've been working with in various projects who are excellent, wonderful people, people I've learned so much from, and they're being taken off of very, very worthy things too. And I've wrestled with sharing that with people because, on one level, it's personal. But also, I think it's worth people knowing that even though you've heard of the big firings and everything, and that got a lot of press, there's a secondary wave that's happening now. And I think there will be a lot of rebuilding to come for the Weather Service. We're really in a good spot for the budgets to come. We're getting a lot of support. What's going on now? There's such bipartisan support for what we do. I think that we are emerging as like sort of a tried and true resource, in the floods case, and there's so much positive there. But I'll be transitioning from being in the national centers into another role. I'll share a little bit more of what that is in the coming days, but just I wanted to the thing I really wanted to say was thank you to the Weather Service for having me for the past 2 years because it's been wonderful. And you all are wonderful. You all believe so hard in the mission, and I couldn't have done what I've been able to do if I hadn't joined. It was worth leaving a federal position at a national lab, at the Severe Storms Lab, to come in and be a contractor for a short time with you. So, for everyone I've worked with, thank you so much for everything that you have shared with me and given me the opportunity to share with you.
I'm going to start off this to telling that we need to be thanking Kim for everything that she has done. She has done amazing things. I've seen her work and it just makes me tired. She does so much and she has done so much. And I told her last night by chat, and I stand by this. I'll go on the record tonight and then I've got to drop off. While some doors close, others will open. And the young lady that is sitting there in that chair in Norman, Oklahoma tonight, you're going to have something so much better come your way. I know it. And it won't just be one thing. Your record of work and the stuff you've worked on and your colleagues have worked on is well known in this enterprise. You will move on and other doors will open. And I'd like 10% if you don't mind. But at the same time, I know you're going far no matter what, because your work ethic has meant so much to the enterprise and you contribute so much to this family. I love you.
Oh, my friend, thank you. Thank you very much.
And
thank you
what
for
people
saying
don't
that.
understand, can't what people don't understand, what we do is not enough. What we do is not enough. Physical science, that's it. That's it. My first major in college was electrical engineering, and I finished in meteorology. I don't know anything about communication, human behavior, and we're asking people to modify their behavior to save their life. And when Kim stepped in, it changed everything. She opened our eyes. We have this interdisciplinary approach that we've never had before. And I don't think you understand, Kim, the difference you've made in the enterprise, like Troy said. So listen, you're just getting started. All right, this is no goodbye here, okay?
No.
You're an integral part of the enterprise, and you always will be. So please hear us when we say that.
Yeah, and I saw you on the Gene Roden podcast many, many years ago, Kim, and I said, we got to have this person, number one, at our Weather Ready convention, our National Weather Association convention, James Spann, that we did here. And then we got to have her be a part of WeatherBrains. So I'm so glad that you joined us because you are our voice of sanity every single week.
True.
Oh gosh, you guys, you're so sweet. It sounds like I'm dying. I'm not dying.
No, you're just getting started. It's like Span and his what he always
I'm-
says. You're just getting
Uh,
started.
Fortunately, I am going to be fine. You know what I do have full faith and confidence in that. No matter what, I think people out there who are struggling in the job market too, just
Yeah.
know I see you. And you know, for what's going on this year, it's nothing against any of us individually. There's nothing any of us did wrong. And there's nothing anyone did wrong in the decisions they made about my position. It makes a lot of sense for where the Weather Service is right now. It has to survive and it has to rebuild and restructure. And there's just everyone that I was working with is gone now. Like, what sense does it make I wouldn't want to stay in a position just to sit in a chair. So I'm grateful that that can go to some use that's, really needed. Um, I will be fine. I want you all to know that this is a tough time and we're going to get through it together. Because just like you've heard on this show, our appreciation of each other, we have all influenced each other. Everyone in this field, we're part of a very tight family, and we are going to be okay. I'm going to be okay, and you're going to be okay.
Bill Murray, in the words of Paul Bear Bryant, tough times never last, but tough people
Tough
do.
people do. That's right.
So we're gonna pause really quick. We are gonna hit Tony Rice. We don't have a This Week in Tornado History, and again, we have a pile of emails. Jen, do you want to hold those and kind of pile them together for next week, or how do you want to handle that, Jen?
Let's do that.
I just feel like that's the right thing to do. And listen, we see your emails, we have read them, we're reading them, and we are thankful for them. And we can't read them all back on the air, but it's important to us to hear back from people that listen to this show, people that consume weather products, and it's very helpful. So thank you. But we're going to pause very quickly for Tony Rice and his astronomy report. Then we'll come back with picks of the week as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Last week, astronomers with ATLAS, the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, which is basically an all-sky survey that's looking for threats to Earth, were alerted to a new object. This happens pretty regularly, but this particular object, which has received the name 3I Atlas, is a bit different. Its brightness and distance indicate it's probably a couple of kilometers across, which is not to be trifled with, but it's also no threat to Earth since its path is going to take it safely by Mars sometime in October. What's interesting about this object is its trajectory, and velocity indicates that it's coming from outside our solar system. And the direction it's coming from is the constellation Sagittarius, which means that its path lines up pretty well with the plane of our solar system. That's where all constellations named for signs of the zodiac live, along the plane of the solar system, or from our perspective, the path that the sun takes through the sky. But that's for another WeatherBrains. We'll be able to see 3I Atlas as it passes about 600 million kilometers from Earth in December, in the evening after sunset. Now, how well we'll be able to see it remains to be seen. And when I talk about seeing comets or asteroids, which the jury's still out on this one, the caveat of if it survives is usually added on, but not this time. We're pretty confident it's going to survive. And that's because this thing is booking it through the solar system at about 58 kilometers per second. And that's so fast that the sun's gravity is barely impacting it. One of the components used to describe the orbit of an object is eccentricity, or how round that orbit is. 0 is a perfect circle, and once the ends of that circle become disconnected and turn into a really curved parabola, that number reaches 1. This object has an eccentricity of 6. It barely curves as it moves through our solar system. Now, I keep calling it an object rather than a comet or an asteroid because we really don't know what it is yet. There have been some indication that it might be a comet, which would make it a lot more visible in December, and we'll be hearing more about this big fast rock or ice ball or whatever it is in the coming months, because it's going to pass nicely inside the view of both the Hubble and James Webb Space Telescope, so stay tuned. Getting a peek of this visitor from outside the solar system is way too good to pass up. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
So let's do picks of the week, and I'll just start with mine. Mine is a little essay I wrote about the just the logistics of the situation in Texas and some thoughts. I don't know why I just looked at the metrics on this. It's done 19 million views, which is terrifying. It's, how times have changed. But it's just some thoughts. And again, all the links to these will be up on weatherbrains.com. Let's go to James Adelot, who's got to do TV here in just a minute. James, what you got for us?
And eerily, mine is also kind of my thoughts and reflections on this Texas tragedy. I never thought I would quote Lord Byron and paraphrase Reverend William Sloane Coffin from New York City. And basically, William Coffin wrote, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, adult deaths are bad, but when children are taken, it cruelly robs all of us of their limitless future, all of the dreams, ambitions, and hopes, the essence of the future. It's no longer there for us and for their families.
Wow. And I am anxious to when all this settles down, when it's over, we learn the names and the faces and hear the stories of these kids. What did they like to do? What were their dreams? That's what I'm kind of like Jen. I like to know about the people involved. In fact, let me just turn it over to you. Your pick of the week. Go.
Well, my pick of the week is for people to focus on the people and maybe take a break from social media and the vitriol and the hate and trying to figure stuff out and going back and forth and reading stuff. I get caught up in it, and you're going back and forth and getting lost in it, and step away from it. And I'm just going to challenge people to give back. I don't care what your preferences. Find a reputable place that can help, whether it's Convoy for Hope or Samaritan's Purse or American Red Cross, whatever you want to do. Give back, because these folks have lost everything, and some folks have lost their parent or their child and their best friend, and in just horrible circumstances. And just I'm going to use one of my mom's quotes. She always says, use cowboy logic. Chew your words before you spit them out. Just stop. Don't speak and try to get caught up in all of the rhetoric. Just do action versus your words, and they'll make just such a difference in people's lives. And just let's bring back humanity, because it does seem to be lost. But I know that there are people, and I see them whenever I go travel. They're loving and they want to help each other. So just stop for a minute and just give back.
It's probably some of the best advice on this entire show. Jen, thank you. Rick Smith, what's your pick of the week?
Boy, I hate to follow that. That's great stuff, Jen. Kim, I always appreciate how positive you are, and it's good to know that you're just going to a different job. You're not going to go very far. So we love you, appreciate that. My pick kind of melds what Kim talked about and what we talked about on the show tonight. It's kind of just a commentary from Jeff Masters on some of the impacts of what could happen in budget proposals down the road. Certainly not settled at this point with the Severe Storms Lab, what impact those lab programs could have had, might have had on this event as far as flash and warn on forecast and things like that. So I think it's a good summary of how all of this kind of ties together.
And again, these picks will be up on weatherbrains.com. And Dr. Jacobs, I know you're watching. This is confirmation hearing week, so we got your back. You know that. It's going to be a big week for Neil. Okay, John Gordon, you're up.
Yes, sir. So I did something with flash flooding. I found this really cool video that's positive. We need some positivity. So Michael Bensky is the storm chaser, and he knew it was raining in the mountains in Arizona. The Weather Service issued a flash flood warning. People think, is that the end of it? Well, no. He went to where he knew the dry wash was, the rainbow wash. And they worked WCM out there, right, Rick? Worked with partners. They shut the road down. They timed it 33 minutes. That road would shut down. This is daytime, of course. And the road shut down, and a huge flash flood came. So we are learning about seriously. And my anti-pick of the week is attacking James Spann is terrible. For all you imbeciles who attack such a good guy, I mean, a really good guy. He did not pay me to say this. A really good guy who cares about the community, who cares about people, and attacking people at the Weather Service in Austin is complete lunacy. Better to be silent and thought of as a fool than to speak and remove all doubt.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate that. Thank you. That means a lot. Okay, Kim, you're up. What you got?
You know, John, I think of that quote so often after I say pretty much anything. Why did I speak? And then I removed all doubt. Now they know that I'm just an idiot. Dang it. Well, following on that thought, I'm going to bring a little bit of our classic levity to this occasion with my pick of the week. This is a total homage to Neil ahead of his confirmation. Hopefully, a really good omen. But I was wine shopping recently, and I found a wine bottle that is a fish. It's a literal. The bottle is a fish. And I think it would probably be a bad idea if I share the exact brand and stuff, so the label's on the other side. But I present to you my pick of the week is a wine fish. And this is for you, Neil. And I will be opening this and toasting to you as you go into your confirmation hearing.
Yes,
Eric.
yes. That might be the greatest pick on this show ever.
Gotta be.
That's outstanding. All right, Bill Murray, go.
Yeah, James. My pick is Geraldo Barrera, who is at this camp, the Mo Ranch on the Guadalupe River. There, he called his president, CEO Tim Huckton, and they 1 a.m. said they had a problem, and they went down and evacuated those kids, and they were proactive, and they're a shining example of what our weather enterprise can do when we all work together. And so, not getting into, accountability and all these things, this is how you do it. And we got to celebrate it. And we need more success stories like this. And we always find them, in the darkest clouds. There's a silver lining, and this is, for me, that silver lining right here. And I don't know who put this in our WeatherBrains chat today, but thank you. It was the first bright ray of sunshine that I've had since Friday morning. So thank you very much. And that's my pick of the week, James.
All right. Want to promote any shows, Bill?
Yeah, James, next week we have our good friend John Bangoff from the National Weather Service and State College. He turned us on to an author who's going to be with us next week. He has a brand new book. His name is Tom Weber. Kim was involved in this book a lot, and I've got to speed read it this week. But it's going to be it's going to be a very fun show, and we need a little bit of fun after this past week. But we'll have Tom and John Bangoff as long as he gets final approval from his handlers, whoever they may be. If you're out there listening, handlers, please approve Mr. Bangoff so we can have him back on the show again. And next week, we always enjoy talking to John, and we're going to enjoy spending a lot of time with Tom Weber next week on WeatherBrains, James.
Awesome. So, and again, a lot of people are watching this for the first time. For those that are watching or listening for the first time, we've been doing this a long time, but we are almost 20 years old. In January, we'll turn 20. We are at episode 11016, but we are typically on the air every Monday night at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. And you can watch the video version live, youtube.com/weatherbrains. Most of you listen to the audio podcast, but if you're new, come back. We're glad you're here. We're straight shooters here. And the collection of, as you can see, folks we have on this show, they're pretty smart. And that's the reason I like hanging out with them. But if you want to get in touch with us, just send us an email. The email address here, it is email@weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thank you for listening or watching. Have a great week, and God bless.
Thank you all.
Whew.
What
Wow.
a show, guys. Oh, my goodness.
Incredible.
That was
Incredible.
good. Thank
Wow.
you.
I'm going to listen to this one over while I'm driving. So thank you, guys.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for
See ya.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.